I'm joined by one of the most flamboyant, one of the most dangerous men in all professional wrestling, Mr. Dangerous Doug Gilbert. Doug, welcome to Southern All-Star Championship Wrestling.
And if you want to talk about old-time Southern wrestling, who more should you talk about than Dangerous Doug Gilbert, because the family history of my brother Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert and my dad Tommy Gilbert, right?
Exactly.
Hold on, I don't want to do all this for you. I'm going to let you ask me a few questions in a second, okay?
Go ahead.
But you can go right ahead, because I think I'm done for a second.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. Growing up in such I would think, a very competitive household, with your dad being a professional athlete, your brother, internationally known and famous, was there any pressure on you growing up as a child? Maybe did you ever feel like you was in their shadow, or do you feel like an Eli Manning, with Archie and Peyton? I mean, does that type of relationship fit with you in your life?
You know what, Reno? The strange thing is people have asked me for years, which now I've been wrestling 20 years. I'm 38 years old, which some people would say, 38, you seem like you're 50 since I started so young. But when you make the comparisons, like you say, Eli Manning to what you're saying is Peyton winning the Super Bowl last year, you're saying Archie was a great quarterback. My dad, you know what? Big shoes to fill would be one aspect, one way to look at it. But you know what? When you're as great as my dad, a lot of people don't know this, which I know a lot of people like my dad, and my dad is a great wrestler. One of the old-time guys told me one time, said, you know what, Doug, the thing about your dad, said you could put a mule up to work one day, and your dad would outwork a mule. That's how my dad was. My dad would go in the ring if it was 60 minutes, which in those days, 60 minutes was all you heard of people going. And still to these days, that's about if people can go that. And most people can't. But my dad was that type of guy, and he wrestled the guys like Luthez, that your main guys, and I don't mean this bad or no disrespect, that your main guys like Jerry Lawler didn't want to wrestle, because he would have tied him up in a knot, and he would have left him laying in the Mid-South Coliseum where he's the king. He wrestled guys such as Nelson Royal, which was the NWA junior champion, which at that time meant right under the world heavyweight champion, and all over the world where he went, that was the main event in those days. Right. And see, my dad wrestled those guys, and those guys had the respect for my dad after they wrestled him those times, like my dad did for them. And Luthez was one of the guys that anywhere all over the country where he went, if anybody tried to tell him what to do, or if you said, come on now, don't hurt my champ or kill my champ, we got to draw money. Look, in this industry, it's like every other industry. What it boils down to, Reno, you know this just like I do, it's a dollar and cents thing. And when you go there, when they told Luthez, said, this is my guy, like I say in Memphis, whether it be a Lawler, or in Texas, whether it be a Funk, or up north, where it be a Bruno Sammartino. Mm-hmm. If they said, Lou, just at least don't make my guy look too bad. If Luthez wanted to, he would tie them every one up in 2 minutes and put them down. That's where my dad, people don't understand, and some people don't see, is where he got to respect the guys, and where he could wrestle so good, and where he was tough. And then you move on to my brother, Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. As far as you say filling his shoes, I'm not going to fill his shoes. My brother was one of the greatest, if not the greatest, wrestler that I have ever been around, that I had the pleasure of being his partner. And I'm not just saying this because he's my brother, but to wrestle with and to wrestle against. And the other thing that people that's not in this industry would never seen, my brother was one of the smartest bookers that I have ever seen in my life.
No, and actually, I would agree with that. And I remember in the early 90s, when I was just first cutting my teeth in the wrestling industry, I had actually, when I was in Memphis, I had beat Brian Christopher, and your brother was the world champion. And at that time, we had it was the first time that I'd ever had a match with your brother, Eddie Gilbert, and I was shaking in my boots. And he was a world champion, I was a Southern champion, and we went to an hour, actually 59 minutes and 30 seconds, and he pinned me. And sometimes people ask me, they say, what is your greatest moment? That was one of my greatest moments. Even though that I lost the match, that I was in the ring with such perfection.
Well, see, what people don't understand, Reno, and like you was in there, and you know what it feels like and what it is, but you ask 95 or 97% of your guys, and I'm not knocking anything in this business, this world changes. Not the wrestling business, the world in general goes around. Everything changes. But in those days, and when I started, if you could go out there and you could go, but everybody could go out there and go 30 or 40 minutes. But Eddie's thing was he'd like to show everybody that he could go an hour when he wanted to or when he had to, or not even if he had to, just to do it to show people that he could. And that's where he took, y'all say big shoes to fill. I'm not ever going to fill Eddie's shoes, but you know what? I'm doing the best to fill Doug's shoes. And it's not Tommy, it's not Hot Stuff Eddie, but it's Dangerous Doug. And what I'm doing is I'm doing it my way, and it's a little bit from my dad, from my brother, from a bunch of other guys.
Now, growing up in the Gilbert household, what was the age difference between you and Eddie?
Eddie was 9 years older than myself.
So Eddie was quite a much, almost, he was a man when you was starting to reach puberty.
Yeah, exactly. And what I got the pleasure of was my dad was older, but he stayed in the business until I started. As soon as I started, that first, not even quite a year, he retired. He just said he wanted to get me started, and he was going to be done and everything, and that's what he done. But Eddie was right there to teach me and to help me any way that I could be. And a lot of people heard it and saw it as far as, like, the people in the real world outside the fans didn't see it, but man, would Eddie ever let me have it. I mean, but and in those days I thought, man, I've never seen anybody be so tough as far as you're talking about on athletes or different people in their profession. But man, what a perfectionist Eddie was. But the whole deal in him being a perfectionist, that's how he got as good as he was, and that's what he wanted me to be.
Well, let me ask you this. As a small child, I'm sure you played sports and ball and whatnot. Did your dad, did he expect you to excel in everything you did? Was he there to push you, or was he there to encourage you, or was he there to kind of let you do your own thing?
You know what, Reno? The strange thing about this is, like any kid during that era, my dad wished me the best at whatever I did, but to be honest, his life, and as rough as wrestling is and everything on your body, on your family, on everything else, he never pushed me away, but he told me he would rather me do something else. He loved every sport I played. He'd come to all my football games, my baseball games, all that, and he loved that. And as far as he told me whatever I wanted to do, I could do it. And I was a man, I was going to have to make my own decisions. But as far as I think he'd rather me done something else, because like the football games he come to, out of a year, he might get to come to one. The baseball games, he might get to come to 2 or 3. But see, when you're on the road, you got to realize, Reno, what we're talking about in those days, if he was even in the territory, the Tennessee territory, what we call it, he would be in Memphis at the Mid-South Coliseum on Monday night, Tuesday night in the Louisville Gardens, Wednesday night the Evansville Auditorium, Thursday night Lexington, Kentucky at Rupp Arena, Friday night somewhere down around Memphis or back up here in Kentucky, Saturday morning Memphis TV, Saturday night Nashville at the fairgrounds, and Sunday somewhere around. So see, that don't give you a lot of time to spend with your family.
And a lot of people really don't realize that on nights that are special occasions, Thanksgiving, Christmas.
Oh, that was big wrestling shows. That wasn't a family.
Exactly.
That wasn't a family thing. But to me, it was a good deal, because on those different shows and stuff, and even like on the Monday nights when I was in kindergarten, first grade and stuff, my dad, right here was the deal. If I was good and I didn't act up or nothing, my dad would carry me to the Mid-South Coliseum, because in them days, which people see on TV now, they see Raw and whatever Thursday or Friday night show is and whatever Vince has got. In those days, what you had was, what was it called then? Which, I mean, it was Memphis wrestling, Nashville wrestling, Louisville wrestling, whatever it was called. That was their wrestling. I mean, it was their stars. You had my dad, Eddie Marlin, Tojo Yamamoto, Jerry Jarrett, Tommy Rich, Bill Dundee, Jerry Lawler. You could go on with a list of about 15 guys. If you went anywhere in Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, Arkansas, Missouri, anywhere in the surrounding states, if you had those guys, you couldn't go in a store without people coming up to you, asking you for your autograph, or actually begging them guys. That's where things have kind of changed and rotated.
Exactly.
Jim's Auto Supply since 1962.
Well, not to change the subject a little bit, but I guess I'm fortunate to say that I'm one that have wrestled every Gilbert. I wrestled your dad.
Yeah.
I wrestled your brother. I've wrestled you. I've actually teamed with you.
Yep.
Who would you say was your toughest opponent that you respected the most? Your toughest opponent that you respected inside the ring and outside the ring. You respected their athletic ability inside the ring, but you also respected them as a man. But you thought that they were a tough son of a gun.
You know what? I'll tell you, as far as we get to toughness, from when I started, like I said, every guy on the card was tough. And the days when I started, which what's funny, we're talking about I graduated in '87. So when I started in '87, when I went in the dressing rooms, you had Terry Gordy, you had like Ted DiBiase, you had where I started was in the Mid South for Bill Watts,
Sure.
and my brother was there. But every guy you had was was bigger guys, but I mean they was like monsters that they wouldn't nobody want to tackle on the street.
Sure.
But when you say toughest, I think of my days in Japan. I've went to Japan 50 times over the last 15 years, and I think of like as far as respecting and guys that have done well as far as over there, like maybe like a Stan Hansen, which I've wrestled when ECW started, which I mean the whole deal, everybody says ECW, Paul Heyman and Extreme. When ECW started, my brother was the one that started it.
Right.
And he brought in like a Stan Hansen, a Terry Funk, all different guys like that. And when I wrestled them, in which in Japan we worked for different offices, wrestled for different offices, but man, you talking about guys that could go. Hansen would be a guy, and I mean, you know, he was 280 pounds, 6'2", 6'3",
Oh, yeah.
but I mean, he was one that would sit and go with you 40, 50, 60 minutes too. And when guys are that big, and I mean, he'd tear through these walls. I mean,
Yeah.
that's when you respect people. But I mean, there was a ton of people in those days up till I'll say 6 or 7 years ago. Almost every guy that you was in the dressing room with, and you know this because you've been around wrestling as long as I have. Every one of the guys, Reno, was tough.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to pick one guy.
Right.
I mean,
And it seems like it really has. A few months back, I went to a WWF event, and I saw some of the guys in there, and I thought, if these guys would have started back when we would have started, those guys would still be sitting on the front row, buying their ticket, being at the gimmick table, buying pictures and asking for autographs.
Right.
But yet, these are the headliners in
But-
World Wrestling
But see,
Federation.
there's a big difference, Reno, and there's certain things people don't want to talk about, which I don't care to talk about them because, like I said, the world changes, wrestling rotates, everything does. In the days me and you're talking about, we didn't have riders. If I was sitting right here talking to you, I'd be looking at a piece of paper or something that the writers had wanted me to say. And if I didn't say exactly what they said, they'd say, cut, and let's do it again. See, that's the difference. I mean, in the days, what me and you're talking about, from the days when my dad started, you had bookers. Your booker was a guy that made the matches.
Yeah.
I mean, he made the matches, and there you was, and he'd tell you, well, you're wrestling, say if he said you're wrestling Reno here, and I'd go out and I'd do my own interview, and I would say what I wanted to say. Reno would go out and he'd do his interview, and then we'd have a match. That was it. I mean,
Yeah.
we didn't have teleprompters, and like I
No.
said, everything goes around, and I'm not knocking anything. I wish everybody the best. I want every young guy to have the chance that we did, which they're not going to, because you don't have 5 or 6 big arenas a week you can go to. If you do not work for Vince, it's rough. You got to be hungry and want it and be able to go to Japan or overseas to make a living, and you got to be hungry here to try to help get something started where you can make a living and grow.
Well, Doug, let's see if we can end this session right here. And let's play a little word association.
Okay.
I'm going to bring up some wrestlers' names that are legendary here in the Mid-South area, and just give me a couple of words of how you feel about each one of these guys. Okay. The first one that I have here on my list is Jackie Fargo.
The true fabulous one. And think about Jackie Fargo. I won't talk for a second, Reno, because I know you don't want me to talk through the whole show. But I remember in 1984, I think it was, Jackie Fargo was when my brother had come back from working for Vince Sr. and Tommy Rich. Jackie brought them in when Steve and Stan left, and they was the new Fabs. And that was something because I got to travel around when I was 13 years old with Tommy. I stayed with him most of the summers, and it was something just being, you talk about different guys that you get to experience things with when you stayed on the road with Tommy for the summer. And it's just, it's like, I mean, you get to know guys. And like I said, when you was at the young age like I was, I think that probably helped me more as far as with the wrestling business and pretty much anything else there.
Got another name for you here.
Okay.
Phil Hickerson.
Phil Hickerson was one of the first, which I know there was always big men and stuff, but as far as big, not muscle-wise or nothing, but the first big, intimidating-looking guy when I was a young man, and I thought, like I said, when I was one of the first guys I ever done anything in with wrestling was Phil.
Phil Hickerson. Norvell Austin.
Oh, I always liked Norvell as far as Norvell was different, and I got to see my brother and Tommy Rich wrestle him and Coco Ware, which I think they call him the PYT, Pretty Young Thing
Right.
Express, and
Right.
I always liked Norvell.
Okay. Lynn Rossi.
Lynn Rossi is another guy that you go back to like my dad as far as or the Luthez type deal, that Lynn Rossi was a wrestler that could nobody handle. I mean, he was I always liked Lynn. I went to his, which he might still have at the vitamin stores
Sure
and stuff
does,
around
down
here.
in Brentwood.
But my dad carried me, and I mean, I've met Lynn and been around him a little bit and everything, but Lynn was a super guy.
Jerry Jarrett.
Jerry Jarrett. Jerry Jarrett is a guy that if you have a lot of people on here will probably tell you mixed things. But I've got nothing to say bad about Jerry Jarrett. Jerry Jarrett made my family a lot of money. He made me a lot of money. He opened doors and gave me a lot of opportunities, and a couple of them I didn't take advantage of. He got me a job with Vince, and to be honest, I thought Japan was better than Vince, so I didn't never forego and or see what that would be like, which maybe I shouldn't. I might have made millions of dollars, but I don't care. I still did well in Japan. So,
Sure.
But I like Jerry. Jerry was a fine guy. I mean, like I say, he was good to me.
Well, speaking of Japan, what about Tojo Yamamoto?
Tojo Yamamoto was the funniest thing. The first match I had was with Tojo, and it was in a very first match. I was scared to death. I was 17 years old, and it was in a little town in Kentucky. Eddie Marlin was the promoter, and I wrestled Tojo in the match. I was scared to death before I went out there, and then after that, there was a battle royal of all things. I thought I made it through Tojo, and he didn't kill me. But I go back to the battle royal, and I look, and everybody's out of the battle royal except me, Tojo, and Bam Bam Bigelow. Then my knees started shaking. I thought, oh my God, I didn't think it'd get no worse, and now look at this. But Tojo was good to me. We traveled a lot together, which that was at the kind of end of his deal when he was just the manager and stuff.
Sure.
When I really started working all the time, and I mean, but Tojo was a great guy.
And the last one on this list is Jerry Lawler.
Do you not have nobody else you could put on that list? I don't want to say nothing bad. You know what? Jerry Lawler drew a lot of money in Memphis. He helped a lot of guys out. Me and him have been crossways and sideways and upside down in court and everything else. But you know what? Jerry Lawler was great for this area. I'm not saying I specifically like everything that he does in his life, but I mean, and there's nobody going to say that about me either, so that's not a bad thing.
Sure.
But Jerry is a great performer, and he is a tough guy. I mean, he is an athlete that can get in the ring, and I mean, he's wrestled all the great guys, which he's been took care of a bunch. But
Sure.
but that's good. I mean, in our business, you have to be sometimes. And I mean, like I said, I'm not going to sit here and bash nobody, but I don't have nothing bad to say about Lawler. Lawler's the king. I mean, whether you like what he's done or not, Lawler has made a bunch of money, and he has become a star doing what he does, talk.
Right. Doug, I want to thank you for this interview. Thank you for this time. You've left your mark on wrestling, on the wrestling world. I think when you retire that you will have left it better than you found it.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Reno. Thank y'all at All-Star Wrestling.